Let's bring out our panel, beginning with executive producer and writer Eric Martin. Executive producer and director Aaron Moorhead. Executive producer and director Justin Benson. You know her as Sophia Di Martino. He loves jet skis and Josta soda. His name is Mobius Owen Wilson. Thank you. And finally, you know him as the god of mischief. Executive producer and Loki himself, Tom Hiddleston.
Thank you so much.
So,
Wow.
they love you. They love all of you.
Thank you so much. It's such a... It's such an honor and a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for coming. We are delighted to be here in front of you. We appreciate it.
Now, I remember Comic-Con events where you came out and were far less gracious with the audience, telling them what reprobates they were and how they'll all kneel before you. What made you so soft?
It was a different time. I was in a different place then.
Yeah.
I had a bad experience with some guys called the Avengers. You may have heard of them. Yeah, although I love doing it. That particular thing I think you're referring to.
Was anybody at Comic-Con for his live appearance as Loki?
Right, wow, amazing. It was a long time ago.
It was.
I think it was in 2013. Mm-hmm. Yes, and thank you for bringing it up. But it was, yeah, a completely unforgettable and possibly unrepeatable experience. Mm-hmm. I've never before had I don't know if you guys have ever had this experience, but Loki is a character I have played exclusively on camera, on screen. And so when I have been in character, I've been in the company of actors and crew on a set, except for July in 2013, when I was actually in the world, on stage, performing live as the character. And it was rather confusing how
how good that felt?
Well, it was a surprise how the audience's response. Mm-hmm. I didn't expect it. It was amazing. I think I planned in my head that if I played my cards right, I could try and get the audience to chant Loki's name. And I came out from the wings on stage, and before I said a word, they started chanting Loki's name. Well, I'm going to have to rethink this.
Yeah. That says something about human nature.
Anyway, it was amazing.
Well, since we just watched the final moments of season 2, we see Loki on his throne. He's finally found a place for himself in the world. We've also seen his demise numerous times, his end numerous times, yes. So I would never count him out. But I'd like to ask you fellas if you have thoughts about, is this a resolution to the arc of this character? And, you know, I know, I'll preface that by saying that I know that decision is not necessarily in your hands, but was that one of the guiding principles, is find a way to sort of bring this character to a conclusion the way Marvel did with Iron Man, Captain America, and some of the other characters who've been around?
Get ready to see some tap dancing. No, certainly with season 1 and 2, we looked at this as a single book, and we wanted to close the book on Loki and the TVA in a satisfying way. But, of course, we all love seeing Tom as Loki, so we'll see what the future holds.
Yes, they do, they say.
That final image, you don't have any lines. It's just a close-up of your face, holding court, I guess. What did you guys want him to project in that moment? What was in your mind? What were you playing in a scene like that where you know you have to convey some kind of emotion, but it's definitely an enigmatic one? What were you hoping to transmute to the audience?
Do you want me to, do you want to go or should I go?
I mean, I'll kick us off. I just remember Tom came to set that day and he was like, I know I've been playing this character for 15 years. Let's throw it all away, whisper something in my ear that's going to change everything. And so we did that. And then that's what you...
What did you say?
I'm joking. No, that definitely didn't happen. That definitely didn't happen.
No, I feel like it happened. I need to know what you said.
The truth is that genuinely you would be the best person to tell this, but I think Aaron Moorhead should do it right now.
Oh. Okay. It was actually quite interesting because we were pretty certain that was going to be the last time we get to see Loki, possibly, ever. And so we were talking about it, and there was it's a big visual effects sequence, so we had a long setup for it, and we were talking about how we wanted that to feel like the culmination of all 15 years. And so we said, why don't you go and kind of go look at the greatest hits, essentially, so it feels very personal to you. And I believe, Tom, what did you then do? Because you disappeared for a little bit.
Yeah, I stepped off the sound stage with the time allowed because the camera team was still rehearsing a move with the techno crane. And I went back to my dressing room and I took Aaron at his word and I watched almost a compressed reel of my whole journey as Loki from the beginning, right at the beginning, in the first Thor, with Chris Hemsworth and Anthony Hopkins and Rene Russo. And and all the way through the Avengers, those moments with Robert and Scarlett and Jeremy and Mark and Chris. And there were two of them, I think. And through the Dark World and Ragnarok and all that, joining the MCU with Jeff Goldblum and Tessa Thompson and up to Infinity War and also season 1 and the time we had all shared, which a season we had shot during the pandemic, and we became very close. And the experience of watching it reminded me that these are not just scenes I've played, but they are whole chapters of my own life. And it reminded me of the friendships I'd made and the experiences I'd had in different parts of the world. And I was filled with such gratitude for the whole of it, for the journey. And I realized that in this moment, Loki is redefining his glorious purpose. And he's discovered it because he's found friends that he loves and wants to care for. And Loki's doing it for his friends and the people he loves. And I thought to myself, well, Tom, do it for your friends and the people you love. That's the truth, honestly. That is the absolute truth. It was. I felt like I was carrying all those people with me, in the way that Loki is carrying those people with him. It was a very special day on set. Very special day for me as an actor, unlike any other, I think. And so grateful to Aaron and Justin for their encouragement. And also, I haven't said this before, the most astonishing crew. And I could see them all, because there was no set that day. And so I could see their faces just as I can see yours. And I felt they were with me as well.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good answer. Yeah. Thank you. And I think when you watch him in that scene, you don't necessarily get all of that, but you get the feeling. And I think you can convey a lot by looking in someone's eyes, and the camera captures it. So well done, everybody. It's very beautiful.
Thank you.
So, Sophia, what was it like to work at McDonald's?
How can I
all
follow?
Season?
How to follow that?
You were doing it for the
great.
people you loved.
I just looked at all of the people and all of the I actually learnt my lesson. You have to be careful what you say to producers.
Yeah, this was your.
At the end of the
This was sparked by your suggestion. So tell the story of how
totally,
Sylvie ended up in these.
It was totally my fault. So at the end of series 1, Kevin Wright, one of the producers, sat me down and said, "So where do you think Sylvie goes next? What's next for her?" And I think I took it a bit literally, because I was thinking, well, I think she'd just be really hungry. She's just killed this guy. She's been on the run for eons. I think she's just really fancy a burger. And then the next thing I know, I'm in a 1982 McDonald's uniform.
Yeah. She's somebody who's lived. She was yanked from her childhood. She's lived through apocalypses. What's the plural of apocalypse? Apocalypsi? Many apocalypses. She's led a very hard, long life, so it almost seems like this is a job where she just can check out. Is that part of it?
I think it's a metaphor for something else, obviously. I think it's just some stillness and a chance to try and be normal and live a quiet, content, happy life. I think that's what she's trying to have a go at. Mm-hmm. She doesn't want to run anymore. She wants to try and make some real human connections.
No more apocalypse.
Yeah, no more running.
Yeah.
She just wants to live. Yeah. But obviously it's not that simple, because she is an outcast and she's not normal, and she can't trust or be trusted. So inevitably everything gets taken away from her again. So it's I see it like a bit of a tragedy for Sylvie.
You actually inspired something else, because when we were having our first meetings, we were kind of talking about what's Sophie's major principles, and we were talking about choice and free will and destiny and all of that. And we took you at your word very literally when you said that that Sylvie is really into choice.
Yeah.
And so you'll notice that, I mean, not you'll notice, you will notice that, working at a restaurant, it has a menu, a lot of choices. She goes to a record store, it's about browsing and checking out everything. She goes to a bar, we used to have a thing in there where she would just, starting from A to Z, she would just try everything on the menu. And so that was a lot of how we helped kind of bring your, small life into focus.
Now, Owen, I would say that Mobius is in kind of the reverse situation, isn't he? He had the quiet, contented life, selling jet skis and living with his kids as a single dad. And I love the moment, I don't think it's in this episode, but when Loki's trying to recruit him back, and he says, "My name was Mobius?" That's a really cool name. And
I really did like that name. I still do.
The idea, he's drawn toward that adventure and that excitement in some way.
Yeah.
Is that how you saw it?
Did you say
I
that?
did.
You said that on the day, didn't you?
Yeah, you
just
did.
In case you don't confess that.
Yeah.
It's just a tribute to Owen's capacity for invention when Loki's trying to persuade him to come back to the TVA. that's you ad-libbed that. You said, what was my name again? And I said, Mobius.
It is cool.
Anyway, take it away.
But yeah, just now, just watching kind of in the wings and watching that scene kind of where you come up to me and, you know, it's, first of all, it's nice just to watch on the big screen and watch with an audience, because the first time we had COVID when it came out, and then the second time we're, you know, excited, and then there's the strike. And even on the way over here today, it's raining hard. I'm like, it's going to be a hurricane or something. But to kind of see the, you know, because when you're doing it, you kind of, I don't know, you and I kind of talked about, you know, what makes for kind of a meaningful work experience, and of course enjoying the people that you work with and feeling that you're kind of doing something interesting, and then if you feel like it has a chance to connect with an audience and it'll get a good reception. And so I definitely felt that from you guys tonight. And of course, that's why we're, you know, telling stories, is to hopefully, you know, have it connect with people. So, yeah.
So Eric, Aaron, and Justin, I wondered if you could talk to us about the full arc of this season. And really, I feel like what you did was you changed Loki's definition of what glorious purpose is. He came to see that it's about sacrificing rather than conquering. What were the steps you needed to go through to make that a believable transition? Some of it, that foundation was laid in the first season, but in the second season, how much further did you feel you had to push this character to make a selfless choice?
That's super flattering that you would think that us two would have the capacity to actually do everything you just said. The truth is that our first meeting on this show, a lot of the stuff was already worked out story-wise by Eric, by Tom, by Sophia, by Owen, by Kevin Wright, all these people, and Tom and Kevin, you kind of pitched it to us, and Aaron and I just immediately went, "That's bold, that's punk, that's so sad, that's so tragic, that's so melancholy," and so. We saw very sincerely, I make a lot of bad jokes and I'm going to apologize ahead of time for that. But really we just saw our job as being like, okay, they want to do this sad, melancholy, tragic, very raw human thing. And our job is to come in and try to amplify that wherever we can from behind the camera, which is a weird spot for us because we aren't naturally just directors behind a camera. We're mostly writer, directors, actors, producers, VFX editors, one of the best photographers in the world. And like we're all these things, and then we show up in the industry at large and we do these jobs where we're just directors. And we're just trying to amplify what all these brilliant artists around us have already figured out. Mm-hmm. And we just saw it as coming in every day and being like, how do we make people more vulnerable if they're willing to do it? And how do we keep the set feeling like it's a place that can have a sense of humor, and hopefully you don't cross a line where people are like, you're not taking this seriously, but that sense of humor on set keeps people loose and relaxed and feeling safe to be vulnerable and to do all those things, and that was our objective in all of this, and hopefully we did that. And to see Owen work out a joke in his mind, and to see Tom carry this whole thing on his shoulders, to see Sophia be a genius, and what's your name, sir? No, and to bring Eric's genius writing to life was what we did.
Eric, do you have anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, well, season one was all about Loki learning to love himself, essentially. And so season two was really him learning to love everyone around him and accept that love, which ultimately allowed him to make that sacrifice, to do something totally selfless. Mm-hmm. And that came from somebody who was very selfish before that. And it was a slow journey to get there, but ultimately it was just all about that humanity that he was pulling out of himself through that.
And we all talked together And they were so enjoyable, these conversations. They're conversations I like to have anyway, about how you find meaning in your life, and how to make the best of this short period that we are here. And Eric, I remember we talked a lot about that in order to become, for any of us, to become the best version of yourself, you have to accept your past. You have to make peace and acknowledge your mistakes and your missteps. And you have to integrate the shadow into your present. And only then are you free to make choices which are more generous, more loving, more honest, more authentic. And that really is, the 2 seasons of Loki have been about identity. Are we capable of growth? And how are we capable of growth? How do you grow? How do you change? How do you step outside of the predetermined tracks that the TVA has laid down? And you do that by acknowledging who you are, the whole of who you are. And I think Loki comes face to face with that, and every character. But there were such enjoyable, such fruitful conversations. I would always go away thinking, wow, these are some of the big questions we're asking. So yeah.
You know, I know that the story evolves over time, but I feel like the threads for how this season resolved, how Loki's story ended up, were present from very early on. I will time jump now and go back to a 2013 interview we did, and quote to you some of your own words. You were describing a scene you had with Chris Hemsworth where you said, Thor says to Loki, even if you win, would that satisfy you? And Loki's response is, satisfaction is not in my nature. And then you brought up a comic book from 2004 where Loki wins. He seizes the throne of Asgard and has no more enemies to defeat. And he's super depressed because that's not really what he wants. And I wonder if, in a sense, martyrdom is perfect for a narcissist like him. His narcissistic tendencies is that he's not really satisfied, but that's not in his nature.
I wonder if this Loki would agree with that. By the way, fantastic analysis. Can I just say,
you were right on.
I'm so grateful to you for going back into the archives and thinking about it so deeply. That's a really interesting question. Yes, it's almost, well, it comes back to this question of what are the primary drivers of our lives? And it's always a great question in any fiction, is if you gave a character what he or she really wanted, would they be happy? And is part of the experience of being alive, the struggle, and the curiosity to keep looking, keep searching for meaning, keep turning over every stone and going, okay, the meaning's not there. I think part of the human experience is to keep looking. And perhaps that's what that line is about. Satisfaction's not in my nature. And that ending of that comic book, when there's nothing left to do, there's no meaning in it because there's no belonging. This, I think, is different. Because Loki becomes Atlas holding up the world, the timeline, holding up people's lives. And that massive responsibility is meaningful. And the melancholy in it is that he is connected to everyone he loves, but he's alone. But he's still with them.
No.
Something to add?
Well, no, I was just, it'll sound funny, but I was thinking about, giving, you said, that's the human thing, and I was saying it's also for animals. Just with my dog on the way over here, I'm feeding him, and he gets so excited, and I've thought sometimes, what would he do if I just gave him all the food, because I think it would rob his life of a lot of meaning because he gets so excited, and his whole day, what would he do if he wasn't begging or thinking about when the next meal? If he just had it right there in front of him, I think he would be, kind of unhappy, or I think a lot of meaning would drain out of his life.
You could tell him.
So that's why I started.
You should tell him later. Listen, I know satisfaction is not in your nature.
Owen, that was the best analogy for the show anyone's ever had.
Well done.
We did that whole scene where you made another analogy about you in the past. I feel like we lost an opportunity.
I know. Yeah.
So, Sophia, what's your thought about where Sylvie might go next? You were very instrumental then in placing her at McDonald's.
I'm
Very
not making
careful.
that mistake again. I'm falling for it again.
I think she's a low-key variant.
Eric, you decide. I'm not doing it again.
She's working at Wendy's now. She's that.
She's a shift manager now.
She's not hungry. She's definitely not hungry.
She's a variant. She's a low-key variant. Does she have the same? Oh, we have a little confetti. Well, we only had the budget for one little piece.
Yeah. A little bit of
So we'll have to keep throwing that around. But she's a Loki variant. Does she branch from him at a certain point and want different things?
Yeah, I think they've wanted different things from the beginning. Mm-hmm. They've always wrestled with their own opinions about what's right. And I think Sylvie, too, is always going to be unsatisfied, in a way. She killed He Who Remains at the end of Series 1, and Series 2 is about her living with that decision and whether it was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. So... There's another one.
So,
like a Charlie Brown confetti.
Eric, were there any paths explored and not taken for this season that you could share with us? I presume you want to stay true to all of the characters, and sometimes a writer will flex their imagination and try and come up just to explore and do some different things. But were there any dead ends that you hit upon? Anything you pulled back from and realized that's not something actually that Loki would do?
No, this was a first draft. And
Good.
No, we had a different episode 5 that I think we all really loved, but I don't think any of us miss it with what we have.
No.
So any of those roadblocks we hit, I think we just found a new way that ended up being better. So.
I mean, Loki, he began as a villain, but still a fairly sympathetic one. You could see where he came from every time one of these falls.
Great.
Laugh.
I feel like this is the most whimsical Q&A.
And then there's going to be a deluge. But how do you maintain the edge for Loki while still giving him a redemption story? I presume you wanted to keep some of the sharp corners of Loki.
Of course, yeah. It's not easy for a leopard to change its spots. Mm-hmm. But like you said, there's to take my hat off to all the screenwriters, including Eric, who've written Loki over the years. We talk about pathos. The late, great Don Payne wrote the screenplay for Thor, the first one. And he gave me such beautiful material that actually his origin story as a villain is that he finds out he doesn't belong in the family of Asgard, that he was adopted and that he was an orphan and left to die on a frozen rock. And that creates such a trauma inside him. And he is heartbroken and confused and angry and feels betrayed. And all of that pain hardens into something destructive, which makes him become a villain. And so that's always been underneath the characterization, as it were, a hidden inner life that Loki possesses, but his outer life, he's still the god of mischief. And his natural inclination is to be playful and anarchic and unpredictable and mercurial and spontaneous and unconventional and uncertain. And so all across the journey through the TVA with Mobius and Sylvie, he's still that guy. He still has ideas, unconventional ways of doing things. And he still has trigger points which make him defensive. But I think those are entertaining to play. And I know Eric always put plenty of conflict in there, in lots of disagreement, lots of passionate disagreement. Loki and Sylvie disagree endlessly about what makes a Loki, and what to do about the TVA, crucially, whether to remain and reform it from inside or to burn it down. And Loki and Mobius disagree about how to do pretty much anything. Was it you say you're the action guy and I'm Mobius, I'm more cerebral. One of us is playing chess, the other playing checkers. So yeah, I hope there's still the familiar trickster, this crazy character that we've all got to know and I've got to inhabit. I hope his edges are still there.
Yeah. I mean, he's the god of mischief. He's not the god of chaos and destruction. And one of the other things that you and I have talked about in previous interviews is that the key to him is control. You mentioned some of the performances that you studied to first play him. Can I refresh your memory about that?
Gosh, what did I say? Back in the Middle Ages.
Yeah. This is Alan Rickman's Hans Gruber in Die Hard. Jack Nicholson's Joker in Tim Burton's Batman, and James Mason's Spy, Philip Van Damme in North by Northwest. Those are all characters that are about control and revenge, or getting their arms around a situation.
Yes.
And I wondered if you feel that thread carried through. It seems like
I also think those three actors were having a great time.
Yes.
And that seemed to me, I just loved those performances as a child. Number 4. Number 5. It's happening. It's happening. Alan Rickman and Jack Nicholson particularly, as a child, or as a young person, I just was so drawn to their performances. They seemed to be having such a wonderful time playing these antagonists, I suppose. And that was part of the charm. They were so charismatic, even though they weren't at the center of those films. Of course, the center of Die Hard is Bruce Willis as John McClane. The center of Batman is Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne. But I think I was inspired by their playfulness and their joy at doing it.
Does Loki have less fun the better person he becomes?
I don't know. Loki still gets to go down to the World's Fair in Chicago and
interrogate Brad.
Exactly. He loved interrogating Brad Wolfe. When they're in the interrogation chamber, that was really fun. Sort of playing with his food, as it were. But about control, yes, I think actually part of the fun of developing the character was putting him under more pressure. We're in the TVA. The TVA is about time, and time is running out. And the clock is ticking, and just feel Loki under enormous pressure to fix these problems. And I really enjoyed the turbulence that creates, actually all this internal turbulence that he's felt all his life. The mask is slipping and it's all coming out, and there's more sincerity and more honesty and more authenticity, which then changes how he engages with every character in the story.
So many stories of redemption where the main character is antagonist or an unlikable character. I'm thinking of Scrooge in A Christmas Story, Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. Stories where the bad guy learns the error of his ways often involve repetition. And that's a part of this show too. Can you tell me about the role? Why is that a storytelling device that's so attractive when you're trying to redeem a character? I think of like the line from, one of my favorite lines from a movie is Citizen Kane, where his political opponent says, I can see you're going to need more than one lesson, and you're going to get more than one lesson. Is that true of Loki too, that he had to learn these things over and over again for them to really stick?
Yeah, the repetition was all about experience. And I think the longer you live, the more experiences you have, wisdom comes with experience. And so Loki was forced to face every possible option and come out the end as the wisest person in existence, which will change a person.
I want to talk about some of the people who aren't here on stage, but I think some of them may be in the audience. Your costume designer, Christine Wada.
Is Christine here? Yay! Oh, Christine, if you're here, we love you. Yeah, Christine Wada is one of the architects of this entire enterprise. Christine, we can't see anything from out here. If you're there, we love you. Christine did both seasons, season 1 and season 2. Essentially was a part of creating the fabric of the TVA. We talked very closely, very early on about that we would take, in season 1, we were stripping Loki of everything that was familiar. Asgard, Odin, Thor, the Avengers, putting him in this bureaucratic institution, and stripping him off his clothes, of the green cape and the horns, putting him in a jumpsuit, and then eventually, a brown suit and tie. Just like.
But your TVA look for the second season was that you had kind of a new coat that was.
I had a lovely pink coat.
Yeah, that was. I don't know if that was TVA authorized, but.
But also, one of the first conversations we had, Christine and I, about season 2 was the costume for the finale.
Yeah.
The
Loki god.
The Loki god costume, but it would be distinctly different from everything that it came before. All the other costumes in the MCU are elaborate and armored and detailed with embellishment, almost as an expression of who he wants to project in the world. And this was more humble and almost monastic. Yes, in a way, he's a king, finally ascending the throne, but perhaps he's more like a monk at the end of time, something monastic and humble about it. And it was one of the very first conversations we had, months, like almost 8 or 9 months before we started filming.
Well, as he grasps these threads of time, they become his cloak, they become like his costume. Can you tell me about turning those burdens into what's wrapped around him? Again, it reminded me a little bit of A Christmas Carol and Marley having the chains wrapped around him.
Yeah, the idea of these strands as timelines was representative of about 1 million things. We had spaghettification, of course, which also looks a lot like the timelines, and we couldn't ignore that visual parallel. And then there's also Loki learning the importance of the connection between people. And so it's a visual metaphor, of course, for the things that are the most important to him, which is connection to the people of the TVA, his friends and all of that, something he didn't have coming into season 1. And so we wanted to make sure that as often as possible we would be using that same visual language of long, thin strands that don't glow, for example. They are very physical, tangible things, and that was why we thought he's becoming the loom by the end of it, and so we should have him physically start to become the loom when he gets into this very humble-looking God Loki here.
How did you devise the look of timeline dissolving? You know, we see these objects begin to turn into those ribbons, those strands. It almost reminds me of being a kid and having, you know, we've had those little Play-Doh kits where you put the different kinds of clay in and you squeeze it and it shoots out a lot of spaghetti. Tell me about the look of that, and again, it seems a little dead. It doesn't glow. It's not luminous. It seems like the ending of something rather than a conveyance of energy or something.
That's the best part of that question is this. Imagine a bunch of people sitting in an office room with no windows, day after day, all of us together having discussions about what you just said. In the back of the room, there's this hero named Chris Townsend.
Yeah.
Who's taking it all in, internalizing it, and somehow turning 2-hour meeting after 2-hour meeting of a bunch of people debating this into an executable plan for one of the best VFX teams in the universe.
Let's hear it for the VFX team. And Chris Townsend. So you look at it and say that, yes, that's what we meant.
No joke though, you're talking about very, very heady conceptual ideas they can come from one line in a script, spaghettified, something like that you just embrace. And that can look a lot of different ways. It seems obvious once you see it, obviously that's spaghettification, right? But before it exists, it's just words coming out of your mouth.
And going into Chris Townsend's poor ears.
Exactly.
And having to decode what we just said.
And Chris Townsend just seems to have like a psychic connection and just understands it, and it always looks great.
But can I chip in? I remember in the writer's room, Kasra Farahani, our extraordinary production designer, was in the writer's room with us. And we had come upon, alighted upon this, we all thought, really compelling idea that a way to keep the stakes high alongside all this existential crisis that everyone's facing is, what if the TVA itself was running out of energy? And where would we find the generator in the basement of the TVA? What would that look like if somehow the generator was had a fault in it? And we started talking about the idea of this somehow this mechanism for generating energy, which wasn't electricity or something like that, but it was in fact time. And we were all bouncing ideas around, and Kasra had been quiet for about 20 minutes. And then he just presented us with a piece of paper, and it was a sketch of the temporal loom. He said, how about this? What if the TVA was running off time itself, and that there was a loom in a sacred chamber which was taking infinite possibility and weaving it into the timeline of reality? And it looked like how it looks in this. And that's just pure artistic invention. It's taking a really conceptual idea that actually our lives contain infinite possibility, and every choice we make determines the next path. But if there was a mechanism for delineating that, and he drew it, and that became the sketch for what the loom was.
Well, you anticipated one of my questions, which was going to be about Kasra, I think, who is also here in the audience.
Kasra, are you here?
Yeah. Yes. I think I heard that Kasra might be here. But before we get to that, I wanted to hit Sophia and Owen and ask you about your work with Christine and your costumes. Did you have a piece of your outfits that you felt a special connection to, or that you especially liked?
Yeah. Well, when we first started Series 1, I was 3 months postpartum. I just had a baby and I was nursing, and so Christine, Christine came up with the genius idea of making the costume like easy access so that I could feed the baby in between takes. And we kept it for Series 2 because I had another baby and I needed to do it again. But yeah, just such a wonderful gift. I didn't have to get changed. I didn't have to waste anyone's time. I didn't have to waste my time. I could just like feed the kids, get back to work. It was super practical, super comfortable, super beautiful, and like the best gift.
Yeah. That is a superhero work ethic.
It takes like a genius costume designer to come up with, just to have that idea. Like, you know what, I'm gonna make it really easy for you. And it's just gonna be Velcro, Velcro, zip, zip, go.
Well done.
Yeah.
How about you, Owen? Do you have anything that detached?
Well, I love the, I like having a uniform, and sometimes I think even in real life it would be nice, where you don't have to put much thought into it. And that's what I like. Mobius has that kind of suit, and the few times that I would show up to work and, that I had to get in a spacesuit one time, I was a little unnerved. Or coming as Don and having my, jet ski stuff, but I don't know, I think that's part of what I liked about playing this character, the name Mobius, the way, his wardrobe, I liked his look, and and just like we're saying, that was all kind of a function of...
It was cool as well.
Yeah, it was, the collars were,
a little madman.
Yeah.
Kind of the whole design was cool.
Yeah.
It wasn't too
I mean, and I didn't want to say that, but I felt cool wearing it.
Cool name, cool costume.
Yeah. TVA is a very stylish place.
It is. The spacesuit is so interesting. It looks super bulky. Is it a real thing, or is that a visual effect?
No, it was pretty bulky.
Yeah, it was real? They really put you in that?
I remember when you were in it, we had to having to help you up the stairs.
Yeah.
Initially. And then do you remember we did it at the end of episode 1, Loki comes in trying to solve the problem of time slipping. Loki flies out of the timeline, and we sort of crash into each other and come back through into the decompression chamber. And I remember part of the stunt was that we were on wires, so that we slid quite far along the gangway, and I had to hold on to each other, for dear life. and then at the end of the scene, I remember there was I think you somehow sort of rolled over me, and I was like, my goodness, this is heavy.
Yeah. Now you get it.
I felt like I've been tackled. No acting required that day.
So back to Kasra Farahani, your wonderful production designer on this.
And director of episode 3.
And director of episode 3, thank you for adding that. You can applaud that.
There.
It's here.
Your favorite.
The TVA has this sort of, I guess, what would you say, like a mid-century modern
was
aesthetic
what
to
he used
it.
to say.
You've got a steampunk Victorian era thing going on with Timely's lab. You've got Ouroboros' OB's workshop, which is a weird mirror of the one that he has in real life before he gets pulled into the TVA. I thought that was kind of an interesting little Easter egg. And I wondered if you could talk about, the work that Kasra did to create so many different worlds within one.
Oh man, he's out here in the audience, so please cast if we get this wrong. But we walked in, he did season 1 as well. And so he is almost entirely responsible for why the show looks the way that it does when it comes to the sets and all of that. And it was funny is we very rarely needed to give him any notes because he had it in his head how this would look. He gave us a lot of references of like Soviet monuments and reactors, a lot of retrofuturism and that sort of look, especially, obviously, this is mostly TVA stuff. But his office is like his mind exploded over the walls, you know? There's just so many interesting things on every little possible surface, and it feels like you're walking into an incubator of his creativity. And, you know, we ended up going to a whole bunch of different time periods in this show. One of the reasons I think that he did episode 3 was because he was able to design the World's Fair, you know, which is just such a juicy thing for anybody who's as brilliant visually as Cass is. And so, you know, we were a little jealous we didn't get to do that episode, but because it was so cool looking. But he also had to design the 5, 6, 7 worlds that we went to in episode 5, and all of those are different time periods, and we're also treating them as different types of films. Like we shot them differently, which required different things from Cass for how to present it. But the good news is he, coming in from season 1 and also being brilliant, he had it all worked out for us. You know, there were a lot of conversations, of course, but an enormous amount of trust as well. The one thing I think we talked about the most was probably the actual mechanism of the loom. Would you say? Yeah. Something like that? Not just how it would look, because that's true, it was exactly that, but it's like exactly what does it do and how does it plug into this and how far away is it and how big is it? Is it as big as a city? Is it as big as a planet? You know, is it 10,000 miles away, 1,000,000 miles away? And all of those conversations, they matter, and they end up in what you see.
I was so curious why so many of the hallways in the TVA are curved, and whether there was a practical filming location for that, or whether that was like symbolic, like the arc of time bends toward justice or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, possibly. I would say they were all sets. They were all sets that Castra built. And we can't overstate Castra's contribution, because I think in Marvel Comics, the TVA, the first appearance of the TVA is in the mid-'80s. But he has created an entire world. And it feels as if it exists. It felt to us on set as if it was a real place. And it's very unusual on a project like this that you could understand every set. You could understand how many floors up you were, or whether something was in the bowels of the building or as a strange offshoot or wing. You had a sense of an enormous institution with archives and different departments. A justice department and a police department and an armory and basement after basement after basement and labyrinthine corridors. And he built them all. He designed them all, and they all cohered as one place that we commit to believing. It's a brilliant creation.
Excellent. Well, I would love to keep talking about the show. Unfortunately, we're out of time. If we keep going, the PaleyFest is going to come out here and prune us. So thank you all for joining us here. Let's hear it for Eric Martin, Aaron Moorhead, Justin Benson, Sophia Martino, Owen Wilson, and Tom Hiddleston.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.